Good morning. Mm. We are in Matthew chapter 22, and we will be looking at verse 23, or starting it, I should say. The same day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies, having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were with us 7 brothers. The first died, and he had married and had no offspring, and left his wife to his brother. And likewise the second also, and the third, even to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said to them, You are mistaken, not knowing the Scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. So, the Sadducees, they were like the opposite end of the spectrum of the Pharisees. Now, there's the great old saying, and we get it kind of from here. The Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection, which is why they were so sad, you see. But the Sadducees, they were the liberal sect, you might say, of Judaism. They questioned the scriptures. They did not believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in really the supernatural at all. And they only believed in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, Pentateuch, because books of Moses, it's got a few names, right? Genesis through Deuteronomy. They didn't consider the rest of the Torah, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, to be scripture. They just the first 5 books. But all that said, I'll come back to this. Maybe that'll be my main point, maybe not. We see mention here of the Levirate marriage rule. This was not Levite, but Levirate. And it's what it's speaking of is this custom that they had, and it was a custom where if a brother did die without children, that the next brother would take his wife and that they'd have children. And the idea was all about inheritance and inheritance laws. If someone dies and they have no kids, it essentially would have left that woman without an inheritance. She would have nothing, to pass down, and so that's kind of the idea. She bought into a family, and so she'd be part of that family's inheritance, and this way she would still have a part of that family's inheritance. Definitely an odd standard by our current day practices, but regardless of that, that wasn't the issue. The issues the Sadducees had was, well, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? And Jesus says, well, that's the thing. And see, they're trying to trick Jesus because they don't believe in the resurrection. So this is a trick question. But Jesus firstly points out, notice what he says, that you do not know the scriptures, right? You are mistaken not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. And so notice the 2 things that he says they deny: the scriptures and the power of God, miraculous power of God. And so he first lets them know that in the resurrection, we are like angels. Now, some people have taken this to assume that like people are sexless in heaven and others. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying that angels don't get married. And I think that's the picture, is that there's no marriage in heaven. There's no need for marriage in heaven. Now, that doesn't mean you won't know your spouse. I like how um, I've heard it put, Paul says about how we will fully know as we are known. And the idea is you'll have a fuller knowledge in heaven. So I'm not going to get dumber and forget who my wife was. But the idea is that in heaven, there won't be any more marrying because there won't be a need to have that picture of Christ and his church, which is what marriage is, a picture of Christ and the church, Ephesians chapter 5. But instead, we have Christ literally and his church literally. And there's no need to procreate in heaven. There's no more kids. I mean, everyone's there. And so he's just saying, so this whole argument you guys are having, it's kind of a moot point. Doesn't really matter. And then secondly, about the resurrection of the dead, because Jesus knows that they only really respect and listen to the Torah, he quotes from Exodus 3:6. And he says, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And he said, hey, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Notice he's still the God of Abraham, still the God of Isaac, still the God of Jacob. And he's pointing to the fact that it's in the present tense. It's not the past tense. God was Abraham's God. God was, no, he is. And so Jesus is kind of showing them how that implies they're still around. They're just not here. Now, by not believing in the resurrection, it literally was like they didn't believe in heaven at all. I mean, that's the idea, is that they didn't believe that there'd be an afterlife. They don't believe in the supernatural. And it's because they didn't believe in the scriptures. Jesus calling them out on both. Verse 29, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. Today, a huge section of those who call themselves Christians, I'm going to put it that way because I hesitate to call it a part of the church. But there are those who are in numerous different churches these days that they very much so deny God's power, deny miracles, deny the exclusivity of Christ. They deny the scriptures. And it's kind of just turned church into a social club. Something that makes people feel good because they go to church. But God is kind of, a wishy-washy, he's just one way to heaven and there's all these other ways to heaven. And sadly, that's in a lot of churches. And it's in a lot of the churches that maybe you and I grew up in. Some of the older traditional mainstream churches that for so long transformed our nation, were the pioneers of what we today experience in church. If you go to a great biblical church, if you go to an awesome church that's close to the Bible, then your church is doing what they really paved the way to do. I mean, that's the thing. And it's sad that so many of those churches have drifted away and they've got into this liberalism in Christianity. Some examples could include, I don't know the names because I don't know, the whole thing kind of sickens me. And so I don't dive too deep. But I know that, some of these liberal scholars, they will gather together and they will meet and they will discuss the Gospels. And as these scholars meet, they will vote on whether or not they think that this was a real story or a fake story. Did Jesus really walk on water or not walk on water? And what you'll find is quite often they pretty much just deny all of the things that are supernatural. And Jesus was just a good guy whom people, said did miraculous things. And they try and take everything and make it very natural. One example of this, and some good people even believe this, and I just don't. But when you see like the feeding of the 5,000, we read that, a handful of chapters back. And Jesus sees the boy, 5 loaves, 2 fish. And they take it and he blesses it and he multiplies it and he feeds the multitudes. What they'll often teach is that, obviously there wouldn't be all these people with just one person with food. And the miracle wasn't that he literally multiplied the food, but at the generosity of the boy, people began to pull out their secret food stores and sharing it amongst one another. And it's like, man, you're taking God's miracle, which it says pretty explicitly what happened, and you're turning it into a non-miracle. That's sad. Pretty much any time I see anything about Christianity on like the History Channel, I know that they're pretty much going to make a mockery of it. They always are trying to show how, well, the plagues, they weren't really these plagues. They were these natural series of events that happened, and this happened, and that happened. And there are those who say that, Moses didn't cross the Red Sea. He went across a marsh, a reed sea, a sea of reeds. Now, just in case you're familiar, and so I don't sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, the word reed and red are actually the same in Hebrew. Funny enough. So you could translate it Reed Sea. The problem is the sea that they cross drowns Pharaoh's army. And if a bunch of soldiers died in a little reedy marsh, that's pretty pathetic. And if you continue to read throughout the Bible, the Red Sea is where Solomon set up his navy. So it's the same Red Sea. And if you also look at the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, well, they use the word red, and that word just means red. It doesn't mean reed. So again, it's people take the Bible and they're trying to take away the miracles, and they're trying to take away the scripture. And so it's a sad thing. And Jesus has some pretty firm words for these guys. You are mistaken, verse 29. That word is actually still the same as deceived. You're deceived. I know you think you know what you're talking about, but you are fooled by Satan. And you don't know the scriptures, and you don't know and believe and acknowledge the power of God. And so this was his response to the Sadducees. And they were very sad, you see. And that's something that, we need to be mindful of, is that we've got friends or family or people who are hanging on to some of these churches that today they're just promoting sin. They're allowing all sorts of different things as being acceptable, where the Bible speaks very, 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 very clearly that it's not acceptable. And so I lay all that out there for you. Obviously, a bunch of you go to my church and a bunch of you don't. All that matters, though, is it a church that's sticking to the scriptures, that believing the power of God is still real, that is not rationalizing miracles and just saying, well, the miracle wasn't that he walked on the water. He was just walking beside the water, and he didn't really multiply the bread and fish. People just started sharing. So, again, watch out for that stuff. That's the stuff I'd start putting off little red flags where I'm sort of like, if the pastor doesn't believe in miracles, the pastor doesn't believe the Bible, well, I don't know what to do with that other than maybe try and go find a place that's doing better. So hopefully you guys believe in the scriptures and the power of God. It's important. So God bless you guys. What's tomorrow? Which is the first commandment of all. That'll be fun. We can go look at the Shema and everything. It'll be fun. All right. So God bless you guys. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. You all take care. Was it Tuesday? Spanish Bible study tonight. Youth Bible study tonight. Send your teens and Spanish speakers accordingly. I'll see you guys around.